Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this continuing Bible study in the book of Galatians, specifically the letter, the epistle to, did I say Galatians? The epistle to the Ephesians. Let's make sure that I'm in the right book here. So we're going to continue a study that we began last week as we were doing a survey of the book of Ephesians. I say a survey, it's been actually a verse by verse study, but if I were doing a full-blown study of Ephesians, it would probably take me several sessions and I would go even deeper into each verse. But we're doing what I hope is a helpful survey, and we're going to continue that today. So just to give you a quick recap of the first couple of chapters, I got it. So Ephesians has 6 chapters, and the first 3 chapters, and it's a letter to a primary city in Asia Minor in the time of Paul in the first century Common Era. And the importance of the book is it can't be overstated, because it was either directly to the Ephesian assembly, which consisted of Jews, but primarily Gentiles, it would seem, at least from the letter. But it could have also been, and more than likely was, a circular letter. In other words, a cyclical letter that was, or circular, more accurately, that would have been read to the assembly at Ephesus, but it would have also been read to other assemblies in the local area, and particularly along a road, and then within a specific geographical region, which would have included Colossae, Hierapolis, and Laodicea. So last week I showed you a map, and I want to recreate, bring that map up again here so that you can see it. And it was a principal city in Asia Minor, and it was famous for a number of its temples and different types of worship that occurred there. So let me bring up the map so that you can see it. And it was an important international, along an important international trade route. So I think what I'll do is do Paul's second missionary journey, and that'll give us a better, more accurate map here. Okay. So I think this was the map that we did last week. That turned out to be very helpful. So let's do that. There we go. Okay, can everyone see my pointer? Oops, I stopped it. Okay, let's try that again. All right, so you should see it now, yes? Okay. So here's my spotlight. You can all see that spotlight, I think. Once again, the spotlight is not coming into view. Okay, you see it, right? All right, so here's Ephesus over here in Western Asia Minor, and it's a harbor town right along the Aegean Sea. And if you notice this road, this inland road here, you come across this triangle of cities: Laodicea, which we know from Revelation 2 and 3, Colossae, and Hierapolis. So it would have been sort of the letter to the Ephesians would have been a cyclical letter that would have been read to all these assemblies, as was probably this letter to the Colossians as well, which is very similar in nature when you read it. So the purpose of the letter to the Ephesians was twofold. One of them was to describe the status or the position of the believers in Yahshua. In other words, where do we stand in Yahshua? And the letter to the Ephesians, the first 3 chapters, give you a good understanding of Paul's overall view about where the believers stand in Yahshua and as his body. And then the latter 3 chapters speak more about practical matters in terms of, in light of the standing in which we find ourselves in Yahshua, how are we to live? How should we live in a way that reflects what our standing in Yahshua is? So the first 3 chapters are very heavily doctrinal, whereas the last 3 chapters are very heavily practical. And please understand that when Paul wrote to any of the assemblies, he wasn't acting in the role of a theologian, right? As we know nowadays, he wasn't an academic. He wasn't in a university. He wasn't trying to make academic points just to, for people to understand the theological arguments in the Messiah. That's not what it was about. Paul was on a practical mission. And his mission specifically was to bring the Gentile peoples into the body of Messiah. And it's interesting that Paul was the person that Yahweh selected to do that, because when you consider Paul's background, he would have been the least likely person that you would think would be the person to do that. So if you take something like Philippians, if you look at Philippians 3, Paul says in verse 4, if someone else thinks they have reasons to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, speaking of himself, circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews. In regard to the law, a Pharisee. As for zeal, persecuting the assembly. As for righteousness based on the law, faultless. But whatever gains to me now, I consider loss for the sake of Messiah. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Messiah Yahshua, my sovereign, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them garbage, that I may gain Messiah and be found in him, not having righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Messiah, the righteousness that comes from Elohim on the basis of faith. Okay, so it's interesting because he's a Hebrew of Hebrews in regard to the law, a Pharisee. So I believe it's significant that Yahweh chose him to be the one to have this message to the Gentiles, because it adds an incredible layer of credibility on the part of Paul. So if you look at Acts chapter 9, where you read of Paul's conversion, he's in verse 1, Saul is breathing out murderous threats against the master's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus. It's kind of ironic that he starts out his prominent mention in the sacred scriptures asking for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. And then he winds up, his main claim to fame is writing a bunch of letters later to all the assemblies in support of Messiah. It's very interesting when you think about that. He starts off with letters meant to destroy them, and he winds up writing letters that have probably brought in more converts into the assembly of the believers throughout the world, Gentile and Jew, than any other writings in history. So try that on for size, right? And then when you go down to verse 10, so he has his experience where Yahweh temporarily strikes him down. And then in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. Yahweh called to him in a vision, Ananias. Yes, master, he answered. Yahweh told him, go to the house of Judah on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, for he is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias come and place his hands on him to restore his sight. And then Yahweh says to Ananias in verse 15, go, this man is my chosen instrument to do what? To proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings, and to the people of Israel. I will show him how much he must suffer for my name. So his mission, it's not ambiguous to us, right? We know specifically what his mission was. This man is my chosen instrument to proclaim my name to the Gentiles and their kings and to the people of Israel, to the ethnos, right? So, and Paul himself says this in his letters, and he says it later in the book of Acts as well. So Paul is specifically chosen for this purpose. So it's rather fascinating to see how he evolves in his thinking. Shabbat shalom, brother Mike. Hello, Mike. Yahweh bless you. Glad you could join us. So he's so it's especially poignant, I think, that Yahweh chooses Paul to proclaim this message, because it adds a layer of credibility that's incredible, because this was a Pharisee, someone zealous for the law. if Yahweh had chosen someone who had been sympathetic towards the Gentiles, right? Someone who was, that someone could have pointed to him and said, oh yeah, well, Saul, you're always kind of weak, you're always kind of soft on the Gentiles and the law and all that, and it wouldn't have as much impact. But this was something where it's like, wow, really? Saul of Tarsus is inviting Gentiles into the faith? This must be serious, right? At least among the Jewish people who knew who he was. So this is something significant that must never be lost on us. So Paul's mission was to bring the assembly together, Jew and Gentile, reversing effectively the curse, the curse of the Tower of Babylon, so to speak, the Tower of Babel. And there's so much more I could say about that, and perhaps I'll do that in a separate study someday, or in a sermon. But for now, just understand that the letter to the Ephesians is heavily speaking about this theme about uniting Jew and Gentile. And interestingly enough, it's speaking as well about the unification of Jew and Gentile, but also under the broader theme of unification of heaven and earth. So you continue to see that theme of heaven and earth expanded within the book of Galatians. And as I mentioned last week, the letter to the Ephesians is heavy on temple language. So you see a description of the Spirit and of the filling of the Spirit. You see a description of, in chapter 2, of the temple, the people being built up into a temple. So in chapter 1 begins with a long, it's a long prayer where Paul worships Yahweh. And the section here, and I forget exactly where it is. I think it's section, let's see here. I think it's from right around from verse 3. Is it 11 through 16, or I forget, but one of those is considered to be the longest verse in the Bible. Let's see. Oh, actually, interestingly, I just Googled longest verse in the Bible, and they gave me Esther 8:9. Okay, so I guess I was wrong on that account. But let me see longest verse in the New Testament. And Google must know, right? Okay, I'm wrong on that one too. It says the longest verse in the New Testament in modern line numbering is Revelation 20 verse 4. Okay, let me quit while I'm not ahead. All right, but anyway, that verse in one, there's a whole section there, paragraph there in Ephesians that is one of the longest verses in the Bible. All right, but it's broken down in several versions so that it's a little bit more comprehensible to us. But there's a very long prayer, is how Paul begins the letter to the Ephesians, and here he's talking about how the great things that Yahweh has done, and how he foreordained us for himself in verse 5 to be adopted as sons and daughters through Yahshua the King. And it talks about how in the King and through his blood we have deliverance, and our sins have been forgiven, the wealth of his grace which he lavished on us, etc. And then it talks about that inheritance. And as I said, that inheritance that he's describing is the inheritance of the world, of the entire world. And that world is going to be given to all of the people of Yahweh. And the Spirit, his Holy Spirit, is given to us today as a down payment for what we're going to receive in the world, because Yahweh's Spirit is going to fill the entire creation as the waters cover the sea. His glory, in other words, is going to fill the entire creation. So we are given his Spirit today as an arabon, a down payment. And I describe the arabon as earnest money. It's kind of like it's a pledge. It's like when you get engaged, a man gets engaged with a woman and he gives her a pledge, right? He gives her in our day, in our modern culture, you give an engagement ring. I'm giving you something valuable to show you that I'm serious about this, right? And everything that I have is one day going to be yours. So it's a promise. The pledge is another way to look at it. It's a promise, right? As a matter of fact, here it's described, in him you were marked out with the spirit of promise, right? The Spirit is the guarantee of our inheritance. The promise of what? The promise that those who are in Yahshua will one day have the kingdom. It's as good as done, right? And then it describes the power. Paul constantly refers in this book in this letter to the Ephesians, of the power of the king. It's very, very important, because it's a reference to Yahshua ascending to his kingdom. It's an inaugurated kingdom. And it says down in verse 18, you will know the wealth of the glory of his inheritance in his holy people, and you will know the outstanding greatness of his power toward us who are loyal to him in faith, according to his working in strength and power. This was the power at work in the king when Yahweh raised him from the dead. So that began new creation. And this is what we're working towards new creation. And Yahweh raised him from the dead with this power, sat him at the right hand in the heavenly places. That's Daniel language, right? Above all rule and authority and power and sovereignty, and above every name that is invoked, both in the present age and also in the age to come. Yes, Yahweh has put all things under his feet. That's Psalm 2, Psalm 110, and has given him to the assembly as the head over all. The assembly is his body. It is the fullness of the one who fills all in all. What is that? That's temple language. As the spirit fills the temple, the cloud fills the temple. You see that in Exodus. You see that in First Kings when Solomon dedicates the temple, that it says that they could barely minister in the temple because the spirit of Yahweh filled it, and they couldn't bear the presence of Yahweh there, you see. So this is what we're talking about here. And that power of Yahshua is spoken of frequently. And again, that power is significant because he speaks about, and the language there is the language of, and I don't know if I emphasized this enough last week, this concept of power above all rule. He rose him from the dead and sat him at his right hand in the heavenly places, above all rule and authority and power and sovereignty. So when he's talking about putting him above all rule and power and sovereignty, he means not just the powers that exist that day, whether it be Caesar or Herod or Pilate or any of the other ones, right? But it's more importantly, the power behind the powers of the world. So it's the powers behind the throne, so to speak. So what Yahshua did when he ascended to power is he overcame all the powers. He's sovereign over all of those powers. And you're going to see that again towards the end of the letter in Ephesians 6 in particular. He's over all the powers. So it's not just that he's sovereign above even Caesar, right? That's small potatoes. He's sovereign over all the powers, including the powers behind Caesar, Satan and his whatever, his and those who serve him, right? In terms of those who are fallen. So it's the power behind the throne that Yahshua has overcome, more importantly. So, and that's for Jew and for Gentile. So everything that's happening on earth is a microcosm of everything that has also happened in heaven, because they were kicked out of heaven, right? This is what you see in Revelation. And this is where Yahshua says in the evangels, he says, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven, you see. So there's a constant reminder that light has defeated darkness, that Yahshua drew all those powers to himself at the cross. And as you see described in places like Romans and Galatians and others, he drew those powers to himself. And we saw also in John 12, a couple of weeks ago, he drew all those powers to himself. When the Son of Man is lifted up, when I'm lifted up, I'm going to draw people to myself, right? He drew all that evil and darkness and sin and degradation to himself, broke the power of sin, forgiving sins, breaking the power of idolatry, and all the things that idolatry represents, and all the evil and all the elemental forces, the things that in our day, it's no different in our day, all the powers that are out there, right? He broke those powers. So all the powers that are throwing their weight against the truth, but they're done. They're a defeated enemy. Even in our days, we see the things that are happening around us and all the pressure being brought to bear by government. We're seeing a lot of that in our country now, in the United States. There's all kinds of stuff that is happening. And it is in reality, death throes of the enemy. This is why it's becoming so fierce, because Satan knows he's a defeated enemy, and because he knows that his time is short. And Yahshua has defeated those powers. He brought all those things to himself at the cross and defeated them and broke the back of those powers. And now we have the hope in Yahshua, and we rule together with him. And our influence, the way that that's manifested in our day, is the influence that we are able to exert in the world in witness to him. That doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer defeats along the way, because an enemy has been broken, but he's not down for the count, right? So even in the ancient world, you had that situation. So it's interesting that Professor Wright describes this, that he has been challenged by people in the past who said, well, if he's a defeated enemy, why do we still have to do things that we do or whatever? Well, that's just the way that that is always happening in warfare. So you think about the Jewish defenders of Masada. So they went into Masada. So there's the Romans come in 70 Common Era, and they destroyed Jerusalem and they defeat the Jews, but the Jews weren't down for the count. Instead, there was a group of Jews that went into Masada, and they held on for another 3 years. And then you also had another rebellion several years later, around 130 Common Era, right? So what is that, about 50 years later? In math, 50, 60 years later. So you had a rebellion under another would-be Messiah who was referred to as Bar Kokhba, and Rabbi Akiva in those days declared him to be a Messiah. And of course, they didn't defeat the Romans, but they held on for a while. But one of the things that they did, which was interesting, is that they started minting their own coins. And on their coins, they had a little picture of the temple. The temple wasn't standing at that point, but it was as if to say, we're going to build the new temple, because that's what happens when the Messiah returns. And then they were numbered with the number of years of their reign. The first year they had year 1, second year they minted coins year 2, third year they minted coins year 3, and then there were no more because the Romans finally defeated them and put them down. But what they were doing was declaring something new that was happening, and of course they never rebuilt the temple. And it's interesting because this is a pretender Messiah that wasn't obviously Messiah, but the Messiah had already come, had already defeated the powers of darkness, and had already ascended to his throne, a la Daniel 7, Daniel 2. And he has been, from that point to present, building his temple, but it's not a temple made with hands, right? So you think about all these things. So he is building his temple, but yet we're still witnessing to his kingdom, and it will not come to full fruition until he makes his second appearing, if you will, right? And when that happens, then it's finally over and everything is turned over to him. And then he does what he has to do in what we refer to as the millennium. So these are all the kinds of things that are going on, and lives are being changed. And one of the things that's being changed is this unification between Jew and Gentile that's occurring. Just as you're uniting heaven and earth by creating a spiritual temple, because that's what happens in the temple. And by the way, that is going to be, by the grace of Yahweh, the theme at the Feast of Tabernacles, building up a temple, a new temple of Yahweh, right? Because that's what we're called to do. Where do heaven and earth meet? They meet in the temple. So when you go into the temple and you worship, you're not trying to connect with heaven. You are in heaven, so to speak, because heaven and earth come together in the temple. And it is a united people, a united humanity that comes together in that temple, which is why the letter of Ephesians is so important, because it's an early writing that shows how both Jew and Gentile were united together, and together are building blocks for that spiritual temple. And this is what you see heavily described in chapter 2. And before I go there, one other thing that I want to mention is that it's interesting that the lives that are being changed through this. There's a lot being described in the book of Ephesians of the way our hearts are being changed, and the way we're drawing nearer to Yahweh and to one another. And as Yahshua overcame the powers of darkness, everything that he was doing was changing lives, even among our enemies. So if you look at a place like the end of Luke, you might be interested to see this here. Let me turn to Luke, and I want to say maybe Luke 23, maybe. Let me see. Is that on screen? So he's taken before Pilate, he's taken before Herod, right? Herod, who in this case would be Herod Antipas. And notice what it says. It says in verse 8 of Luke 23, it says, Herod was delighted at the opportunity to see Yahshua because he had heard about him and had been hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Yahshua question after question, but Yahshua refused to answer, though Yahshua wasn't about to humor him. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the teachers of religious law stood there shouting their accusations. Then Herod and his soldiers began mocking and ridiculing Yahshua. Finally, they put a royal robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. So look what's happening. He has Herod and his soldiers mocking and ridiculing Yahshua. Herod is representing the governments of those days, right? Then you have not only that, but on top of that, the leading priests and teachers of religious law stood there shouting their accusations. He's getting it from every angle, from every side, right? He's getting it from the religious authorities. He's getting it from the governmental authorities. What is that? That is the fury of these evil forces, these wicked forces of the adversary being thrown against Yahshua because the enemy's nearly defeated, right? This is John 12 stuff where he says, and this would have happened shortly before he was caught. John 12:20, some Greeks who had come to Jerusalem, notice it's Greeks, it's foreigners. Some Greeks who had come to Jerusalem for the Passover celebration paid a visit to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee. They said, "Sir, we want to meet Yahshua." Philip told Andrew about it, and they went together to ask Yahshua. Look at what Yahshua replies. He says, "Now the time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory." What's that? That's Daniel language, right? The Son of Man is the messianic figure that's going to ascend to his throne. The time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory. That's temple language. He's going to ascend to his throne. The time has come. He didn't say it's going to happen 2,000 years from now, 2 millennia from now. So everyone thinks Yahshua's coming in the future and that's when he's going to become king. No, it happened way back then when he inaugurated his kingdom. He says, "I tell you the truth, which is why there was a fury, which was why there was an uptick in demonic possession that you see do you think this was all normal, that there was demonic possession all the time in the land of Israel? I don't believe so. This is a unique period of history. It's like if you're stirring up the waters and all of a sudden all the filth is coming to the top. So you're seeing illness. Yahshua would spend from morning to evening healing people because illness was at a peak. Demonic possession and spiritual maladies were at a peak. Violence was at a peak. You see Yahshua referring in several instances to instances of violence, right? Because this is what happens when an enemy is about to be defeated. They turn up the heat, and that's what's going on throughout all the Gospels. He's doing his thing. He's going and ministering, and as he's ministering, evil is bubbling to the surface and reaching a pitch of fury. And that's what you see over in what we just read in Luke 23. Is evil. It's like it's in his face, right? It's like reaching a peak because it knows that it's almost defeated. So he says here in John 12, he says, "I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives." He says, "I'm about to be planted, and the crop that's going to come up from me is going to be all of you. Those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Anyone who wants to serve me must follow me, because my servants must be where I am, and the Father will honor anyone who serves me. Now my soul is deeply troubled. Should I pray, 'Father, save me from this hour?' But this is the very reason I came." He's feeling the heat, right? "Should I pray? My soul is deeply troubled." Yeah, I'll say. And he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he describes how, the burden is so heavy that he's like sweating tears, sweating like drops of blood because the burden is so strong. "Father, should I pray? 'Father, save me from this hour?' He even says, 'Father, if it's possible, remove this from me, but let it be your will nevertheless. For this is this is the very reason I came." So he's like strengthening himself. There's a grammatical construction in the Hebrew language, which is known as the hit pile. It's you have 7 different verb stems of verbs, and those 7 are different things. So like one of them intensifies things. So for example, if you have the word break, the intensive verb, the same verb but in a different format, means to shatter, right? It's an intensive way. But then there's another one that's called the hit pile, which is something being reflecting upon itself, being reflexive. So he's kind of like doing this here, right? He's like he's expressing anguish, but then he's reflecting comfort to himself. Should I pray, Father, save me from this hour? But this, as if his own answer comes to him. But this is the very reason I came. Father, bring glory to your name. I'm going to proceed, right? And then the voice from heaven confirms it and encourages him. He says, I have already brought glory to my name, and I will do so again. And it sounds like thunder to the crowd. And then he says to them, the voice, verse 30, was for your benefit, was not mine. The time, notice, the time for judging this world has come, when Satan, the ruler of this world, will be cast out. And that's why everything is at a pitch fury. And when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw everyone to myself. And that's the drawing, like I said, like a magnet, drawing all this evil and wickedness and idolatry and all the forces of evil and pain to himself. And then he's going to defeat it there at the cross. And then he's going to be able to, and through that act of love, the world is changed forever. My light will shine for you just a little longer. Walk in the light while you can, so the darkness will not overtake you. Those who walk in the darkness cannot see where they're going. Put your trust in the light while there's still time. Then you will become children of the light. And then when you go back to Luke 23, so he has the priests and the teachers of the law shouting their accusations, Herod, his soldiers mocking him. And then look at what it says in verse 12. Even despite that, it says, Herod, there's a little gloss here, which is almost insignificant. It's in parentheses, which is almost like out of place. It says, Herod and Pilate, who had been enemies before, became friends that day. So he's even changing the hearts of the enemies, right? So you could look at that one of two ways, that the enemy of my enemy now is my friend, united against, right? Is darkness united against light. But there's another connotation there, that even the enemies, even those who are enemies, are being reconciled to one another. See, it's like, even despite themselves, he's affecting their lives too. So it's kind of interesting when you look at that and you see, yes, there's something special that's going on here. So just keep things like that in mind as we continue through Ephesians. So let me go back to Ephesians 2. And Ephesians 2 gives more about that temple language, right? And it talks about the grace of Yahweh. And then it talks about how the Gentiles, who one time were far away, now are brought near. And then down in verse 17, so the Messiah came and gave the good news. Peace had come. Peace, that is, for those of you who are a long way away, Gentiles, and peace too for those who are the so-called, wait a minute. What did I do? Okay, so the Messiah came and gave the good news. Peace had come. Peace, that is, for those of you who are a long way away, that's Gentiles, and peace too for those who are close at hand, that's Jews. Through him, you see, we both have access to the Father in the one Spirit, united. So unity is very important in the book of Ephesians. Two major themes, unity and holiness. You have to have both in order to have this body built up. This is the result of bringing them together. You are no longer foreigners or strangers. No, you are fellow citizens with Yahweh's holy people. You are members of Yahweh's household. You are built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with King Yahshua himself as the cornerstone. In him, the whole building is fitted together and grows into a holy temple in Yahweh. And then I showed you last week, 2 Peter, right? You too are being built up together in him into a place where Yahweh will live by the Spirit. Okay, give me a minute here. 1 Peter, not 2 Peter. Just want to confirm that. Okay. For some reason, I always think it's 2 Peter. I think it's because it's chapter 2 of 1 Peter. But 1 Peter 2 talks about the temple language that I'm describing here in Ephesians. All right, so let's go back to, can everyone see the text on screen? Okay, let's go back then to Ephesians 3 and continue. So this last chapter of the Ephesians 3 is the first half of Ephesians. So when I think of all this, I, Paul, a prisoner of Messiah Yahshua for the benefit of you Gentiles, and that's a reference to his special mission to Gentiles, assuming, by the way, and then it's kind of like an off thought, right? Assuming, by the way, that you know Elohim gave me the special responsibility of extending his grace to you Gentiles, right? Which is what I showed you earlier. As I briefly wrote, or so he wants to remind them, hey, maybe you don't know this, but that was my mission. As I briefly wrote earlier, Elohim himself revealed his mysterious plan to me. And this term, and I'm going to have to go, as I said, to a different translation to show you the Greek here, right? So I'll have them kind of side by side so we can return to it, and as we need to look up any words here. So you see this word mystery. In reading this, verse 4, then you will be, it's in here in verse 2 also. You have heard about the administration of Yahweh's grace that was given to me for you. That is the mystery made known to me by his revelation. This word is the word mysterion. You see that in the bottom left there, mysterion. It's the word from which we get the English word mystery, right? Made known to me by revelation. What is revelation? Apocalypsis. This word, the word that we get, apocalypse or revelation, okay? This is the mystery made known to me by revelation, as I've already written briefly. So this mystery and apocalypsis, I'm so used to saying apocalypsis, that it's apocalypsis. Those two words are related, and they both have to do with this concept of something that was once under wraps and not known. And it's not a mystery in the sense of some type of mystical thing or some type of, secret society type of thing, that kind of, it's not that kind of mystery. It's referring to something that at one time was not known, that by the grace of Yahweh in this context is now known. It's that idea of removing that veil that did not allow us to see that particular thing. And all of a sudden now that veil has been removed and now we see it. And sometimes, depending on the situation, the veil is removed suddenly and it's a big surprise, right? So you see that, as I've described many times, with the armies, the hosts of Yahweh that are revealed to people on the ground. Or, Stephen sees, it's revealed to him when he's stoned. Yahweh allows him to see his presence, right? It talks about how, Stephen sees and he says, oh, I see, I see the son going to the Son of Man going to the right hand of the Father, right? It's like you see many instances of that in the Old Testament. It's referred to as in theology, they refer to that as what is the term that they use as oh goodness, it escapes me right now. Okay, I can't remember the term, but it's whenever you have these appearances. So the angel appears to Manoah, right? Samson's father, or an angel appears to Jacob, right? Those are special appearances that are in effect apocalypsis, right? They're suddenly, it's that veil between heaven and earth is temporarily unveiled so that you could see what has always been there. And Paul's saying that he's had one of these revelations, and it's this, and the mystery of Yahweh's plan is made known to him, the administration of Yahweh's grace, because it's something that no one understood, this plan to bring Jew and Gentile together in this way. And Paul is describing how that has been made known to him, okay? As I've already written briefly. In reading this, then you will be able to understand my insight into the mystery of Messiah, mysterion, which was not made known to people in other generations, you see, as it has now been revealed by the Spirit to Yahweh's holy apostles and prophets. So it was not known at one time, but now is the time for it to be made known. And this is what I'm revealing to you. This mystery is that one. And then he tells you what it is. This mystery, there's no mystery about it, right? It's here. There's no mystery in that sense that we know it. It's a mystery of something that once wasn't revealed and now is. This mystery is that through the gospel, the Gentiles are heirs together with Israel. In other words, heirs are ones who are going to receive the inheritance. So whereas one time everybody thought, well, only the Jews are going to be saved and they're going to get the Holy Land in Israel, it's really more than that. It's the entire world is going to be for the people of Yahweh. Together with their heirs, together with Israel, members together of one body, and sharers together in the promise of Messiah Yahshua. So he wants to encourage them, you see. I became a servant of this gospel by the gift of Yahweh's grace given me through the working of his power. There's that concept of power again. So we think that we're powerless in this world. And you look at the book of Ephesians, and we're told that we have incredible power because we sit with the Messiah on the seats of power. We're told that, right? He says let me see here. Over in chapter 2, verse 6. Let me get that for you. And Elohim raised up, this is Ephesians 2:6, and Elohim raised us up with Messiah. He raised us up with Messiah. And this is metaphorical because he didn't raise us up physically yet, right? We're not in our spirit bodies yet. Elohim raised us up with Messiah and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Messiah Yahshua. What is that? That's Daniel language. In order that in the coming ages, he might show the incomparable riches of his grace expressed in the kindness to us in Messiah Yahshua. So he tells us that we're already raised with him, seated with him in the heavenly realms. What does that mean? It means that we're already ruling with him. But because it doesn't look to people out there, they mock this idea because, very obviously, in terms of the world in which we live, the secular world, we have no such power, right? Even if we're in government, I've been in government for all of my adult career. I've been in state government and in federal government over 30 years now. And I promise you, I don't have that kind of power, okay? I'm a pencil pusher by comparison, right? It is what it is. I mean, a little bit more than that, but and I do it with a computer. I don't do it with a pencil. But anyway, all right. But my point is that it's not about the trappings of this world, the physical aspects of this world. It's about the spiritual aspects. We are reigning with Messiah, and the influence of his worshipers are throughout the entire earth. And I described last week, as I was closing the session, I described that one book that shows how so many major things that have occurred in history, from education to medicine to science to the printing press and on, how all of these things were affected by those who were who claimed to be followers of Messiah, right? Under the guise mainly of Christianity. And of course, we have to contend with the fact that the majority of Christianity has deviated in terms of doctrines, many of the sound doctrines of the scriptures, but nevertheless, it is still the heritage that proceeded from that time forward. So we have to look at all that, and we have to understand that that is part of the reign that he's talking about. Now, one day that's going to be, in terms of the reigns of government, that actually is going to be done in a more visible way, but that's not the way it's being done right now. But we are witnessing his faith throughout the entire earth. I was checking the other day the amount of resource materials out there, like the word of Yahweh. You know how many translations the word of Yahweh has been put into, and how many different. You go out right now to Amazon or to some other bookstore, CBD or whatever. You know how many different versions and translations of the word of Yahweh you can find. Anyone on this earth at this point who wants to get access to the word of Yahweh can have access to it and know the revealed word of the Almighty himself in print, digitally, in large print if they want to, and on it could go. So this message is going far and wide. So when we think that we don't have any power, think again. Let's go back to Ephesians 3. And he's going to repeat this again and again. So I became a servant of this gospel by the gift of Yahweh's grace given me through the workings of his power. Although I am less than the least of all Yahweh's people, this grace was given me to preach to the Gentiles the boundless riches of Messiah, and to make plain to everyone the administration of this mystery, which for ages past was kept hidden in Elohim, who created all things. His intent was that now, through the assembly, that's us, the manifold wisdom of Elohim, and notice that term manifold, the manifold witness, manifold, the word is polypoikilos, which means multicolored, diverse, intricate. You think about like Joseph's multicolored thing, right? His coat. His intent was that now through the assembly, the manifold wisdom of Elohim should be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms, according to his eternal purpose that he accomplished in Messiah Yahshua, our master. Let me see here. Just give me a minute, okay? It's kind of like, can you see that I 104? Okay, Psalm 104, oh Yahweh, 24. What a variety of things you have made. In wisdom you have made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here's the ocean, vast and wide, teeming with life of every kind, both large and small, etc. And he talks about all these varied things that Yahweh has made. It's kind of a reflection of a passage such as this. Okay, all right, let's go back. So he says, verse. Let me repeat verse 10. His intent was that now through the assembly, the manifold wisdom of Elohim should be made known to the rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms, according to his eternal purpose that he accomplished in Messiah Yahshua, our master. In him and through faith in him, we may approach Yahweh with freedom and confidence. Freedom and confidence. I love that. I ask you, therefore, not to be discouraged because of my sufferings for you, which are your glory. What's happening there? Well, just like in the present day, someone who has been in prison it can be looked down upon by people, and it appears that not everybody knew exactly who Paul was, right? And which is kind of interesting because Paul was very widely known, including Ephesus, but apparently there were some people here who didn't know him. Which is one of the reasons why some people think this was a cyclical letter that was maybe a letter to Laodicea or one of the other cities and was read to everyone else, including the Ephesians, and maybe not addressed directly to the Ephesians. Doesn't really matter either way. This is kind of interesting that there's language in there that kind of points in that direction. But what he's saying here is that don't be ashamed of me, right? Don't let my imprisonment affect your perception of my message, because some people think that in the ancient times, being in prison was no big deal. No, it's just like today, right? It carries a stigma with it. So Paul was arrested so much, right, that someone could have easily said, "What is it with this guy? Right? He's always in prison." No, and they might have thought, "Well, why should I listen to him? He's the authorities finally caught up with them, and what's wrong with him?" And he says, "No. He says, don't be ashamed of me. I'm not doing something wrong. I'm doing something right." And the world rulers are reacting against it. So I ask you, therefore, not to be discouraged because of my sufferings for you, which are your glory. Says this, we're doing something right. I'm doing this, and this is why I'm suffering. I'm suffering for the glory of Messiah. And then he goes back into praise again, right? For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. There's the heaven and earth connection again, right? There's always this heaven and earth correction. For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power. There it is, through his spirit. That word power, dynamis, is the word from which we get the word dynamite. Through his spirit in your inner being, so that Messiah may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all Yahweh's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Messiah, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of Elohim. What is that? Again, that's temple language. So that, in other words, that the Spirit may come like it's coming into the temple that you are. The Spirit is coming. Yahweh's glory may it come into his temple, which is you, because Yahweh abides in the presence of his saints, right? And where is that Psalm? Is it Psalm 22? Let me see. No. uh, Psalm, 22:3. Okay, I was there. All right, give me a minute. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel, right? So Yahweh abides in the midst of his people. So um, back to Ephesians 3. So this is the prayer that he makes here. I'm going to go back to it in the NLT. Verse 14, when I think of all this, I fall to my knees and pray to the Father, the creator of everything in heaven and on earth. I pray that from his glorious, unlimited resources, he will empower you with inner strength through his spirit. Then Messiah will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into Yahweh's love and keep you strong. And may you have the power to understand, as all Yahweh's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Messiah, though it is too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from Elohim. Now all glory to Elohim, who is able through his mighty power. So see how much this power is mentioned? Who through his mighty power at work within us to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. So in other words, we have more strength than we even think that we have. Glory to him in the assembly and in Messiah Yahshua through all generations, forever and ever. Amen. And then, so he concludes this section of this doctrinal section with how he began, with a prayer. Okay, so then starting chapter 4, then we switch over in tonality to more, okay, how do we live now? In light of all this, how should we live? Therefore, I, a prisoner for serving Yahweh, and that term prisoner is one who's bound, desmios, as a prisoner for Yahweh, for serving Yahweh, beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, right? So he says, I've just given you a major description of who you are in Messiah and what you stand for and how you're one that reigns with him. So therefore, that's no light thing, and you shouldn't take that lightly, right? And this is a message to us in our day as well. So Yahweh wants us to lead a life worthy of our calling, right? So I beg you, he says, to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by Elohim. So now he starts describing very specifically what that means. So he says, always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. So I can go through this a lot quicker, I think. We still have an hour, but I can go through this a lot quicker because it's pretty straightforward, right? Always be humble and gentle, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Do we do that with one another? Are we patient with one another and with those around us? Are we humble? Are we gentle? Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is one body and one spirit, one body, Jew and Gentile, unified, right? One spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. So here's the call to unity. So when people see us, they need to see a people who are in unity. This is one of the reasons why it's been so difficult over the last 2,000 years, because the body of Messiah has been so fractured and so fragmented for many, many reasons, but it's been so fragmented with all kinds of different doctrines and all kinds of deviations from the scriptures that people hardly recognize it anymore. So it's hard for this world to take it seriously. I don't know if something's going to occur, that's going to change that. And, as I look around me and as I see the kind of things that we're enduring these days, one of the things that typically unites people is crisis, right? And and I often wonder if the reason why we go through crises is so that we can rethink that. No. So, as the heat is turned up, will we rethink the divisions among us? Will we become more united in the way in which we do things, or will we continue to fragment? I don't think that we can continue to fragment, because um, we're not going to have that luxury of doing that. So I'm at a loss. I don't know what to say to you in terms of what might happen for how we might unite. I see things so fragmented, even amongst those who are, emphasizing the name of Yahweh and the Torah and everything, and those who do not. I don't know what we can do to turn that around in such a way that, are we ever going to be completely in agreement on things? No, that's not going to happen, I don't believe, until Yahshua returns. But can we agree enough, like an Amos 3:3 situation, right? Can two walk together except they be agreed? Will we find that common ground to be able to withstand the attacks of the adversary? I believe we're going to have to. I don't know how that's going to happen, but I believe it's going to have to happen, or else we're not going to survive. I'll just take a quick deviation here. I don't mind putting this on tape because, but as I'm looking at the things that are happening out there, I look at the trends, and I've always explained this to you when it comes to prophetic things. I don't say this is a fulfillment of prophecy and this is a specific fulfillment. But as I've explained, especially going through the Matthew 24 material over the last few weeks, I explained to you that there are resonances of things that have already happened in the past. There are resonances that will continue through the present day, and they will take a format in our day similar to what in history has already been done. And you might have heard me in my prayer the other day, asking for Yahweh's guidance and his blessing. And the language that I was using was such that it's our turn now, right? It was their turn. At one time it was Paul's turn and Peter's turn and all these guys, and they went through what they went through. And then later in history, there were others who suffered persecution during the time of the Colosseum in Rome and all those things. And then there were others down in the course of history. And in every epic, in every generation, you can see, I can point to you things like Fox's Book of Martyrs, right? Or you can see some of the people who left the so-called, old world to come into the new world. And what brought them to the new world? Largely speaking, it was religion, wasn't it? It was persecution because of the religion that they kept that brought them into the new world. Why did the pilgrims come here? They came here because they were a persecution, and on we could go, right? So, which is not surprising, because that's the way the assembly started, isn't it? When you go to Acts chapter 8 and you start seeing the flourishing of the assembly, and it was a flourishing despite persecution. But what was it that started it and that began to spread it? It was persecution, right? So those kind of things are going to happen. I'm not saying that's our only legacy, right? It's not just persecution, it's also glory. When you look at something like Joel, the book of Joel, and you see the exploits that are going to be done, there's going to be a point at which those exploits are going to be done in our day as well. They're going to have to be. And they're described in places like the book of Revelation. So it's important to keep the big picture in mind, because now it's our turn, or our children's turn, as the case may be. It sure appears like it's going to be our turn, because that's the way the world is turning, and that's the way the trends seem to be going. So I'm looking at things like, the kinds of machinery that are going in place now because of COVID. COVID has changed our world. I hope you realize that. It has significantly changed our world, and things are different now, and they're not going back to what they used to be. Some of that will be good, other things not so much. Right? It's the crisis, the magnitude of world crisis is such that it has put certain types of machinery in place that is not going to be tucked nicely back into a box, because when power begins to taste how they can expand, they don't just willingly give that back, right? And when I look at some of the other trends, I was looking at something today from an outfit called the World Economic Forum, the WEF. And the World Economic Forum studies all kinds of things dealing with industry and government and power and all kinds of things that are happening. And the one I was looking at today, the one report, had to do with technologies, and it's talking about things like artificial intelligence and blockchain, which is a whole interesting thing in and of itself. So if you're hearing about things like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the like, that involves something called blockchain, which involves systems of distributing information and protecting information so that people can't hack into it and things of that nature. So when I look at things like the advance of blockchain, that's very significant. And I don't know a whole lot about it, and I have to educate myself because I need to know how that stuff works, because undoubtedly things that's going to have some kind of involvement in some of the things that are going to occur as we get closer to Yahshua's return. And then, you also have what's called the Internet of Things. That's a term that I just learned recently, the Internet of Things, IoT, which is when you look at the interconnectivity with things like smartphones and, and these things like that connect houses with, Ring and all that kind of stuff. These are things known as the Internet of Things, and automated vehicles, and there's a whole host of things, the way that data is distributed. All of those things can be used for great blessing, like all technology, but they can also be used by those who are power hungry in ways that are not so kosher, right? I also look at things like the way that the internet is experiencing, different elements of the internet are experiencing ransomware attacks and the like. Being in government, I can tell you that one of the biggest pushes that we've had towards employment, one of the greatest, the most urgent areas of employment throughout government right now is the area of cybersecurity. And it's hard to find people who are qualified to deal with issues of cybersecurity and keeping networks secure and things of that nature. And it's not just limited to government. Everyone is having a hard time finding people who know how to do it in the private sector as well as the public sector. And it's so desperately needed because we're seeing, attack after attack after attack, and that only stands to get worse. So I'm not trying to paint the bleak picture, but I just want you to know that these things are happening in the background. We're not living in a stable world right now. So when you see these kind of things that are happening, we have to, it's like Yahshua said, reading the signs of the times, we have to be aware. It's not like you could point to any one particular thing and say, oh, there it is, or that's it, or that's that. This is why I don't listen to conspiracy theorists and, oh, this is the mark of the beast, and that's where I'm not interested in any of that. But I am definitely interested in trends. And we need to keep an eye on these things because the world is in motion and the powers are being stirred. And when the powers are being stirred, there's a reason why they're being stirred. And what you see in the book of Ephesians is similar to, in terms of the power that was being stirred in that time, we're going to see some similar type of thing in our time as well. So keep these things in mind as we go through all this, right? So we're not caught unawares. So it's not something for us to be fearful. It's not something to be, paranoid about. It's not something to think about conspiracy theories or anything of that nature, right? It's about reading the signs of the times, like you're checking for the weather and you say, there's a storm coming, right? So I guess what I'm saying with all this is there's a storm coming and we have to keep an eye out for it and be ready, okay? But the best way that we can be ready is by preparing ourselves spiritually. That's the best thing we can do, right? We don't need to be fearful. We don't need to be paranoid. We don't need to be, go off base. What we got to do is always be working on our lives so that we can be spiritually sound, so that we can give a great witness, so that no matter what happens, we're ready to present our witness to the world and to do it in a positive, optimistic way, because we know that we're on the winning side. We know it already. So what is there to fear, right? Yeah, the things are concerning. Yeah, there's a part of us that always says, I don't look forward to certain of these things happening, but ultimately we're on the winning side. And I want you to always to remember that and be hopeful for that. And when we look at something like a book of Ephesians, that's what I want you to take mostly out of this, okay? Is that hope. So let's go back to Ephesians 4, and he's talking about this glorious hope for the future, right? There's one sovereign, one faith, one baptism, one Elohim and Father of all, who is over all, in all, and through and living through all. This is, again, temple language, right? That's just as if you have the cloud that's filling the temple. However, he has given each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Messiah. That is why the scriptures say, when he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives and gave gifts to his people. And this is a reference to Psalm 68. Notice that it says he ascended. This clearly means that Messiah also descended to our lowly world. And the same one who descended is the one who ascended higher than all the heavens, so that he might fill the entire universe with himself. So he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives and gave gifts to his people. Notice that it says he ascended. He ascended. This clearly means that Messiah also descended to our lowly world. So this is talking about, I believe, Yahshua's sojourn in the midst of his ministry on earth, and then he ascended to his throne, right? And the same one who descended is the one who ascended higher than all the heavens. In other words, he's the one chiefly in power. He's above any of the powers, so that he might fill the entire universe with himself. This is the idea of, again, temple language, of his glory filling the entire world, the entire universe. This is the picture of like Psalm 8, not Psalm, Proverbs 8, wisdom personified, right? You know what, let me open a different text here. This is Proverbs 8 type of language. Wisdom calls out, and then down a little bit further down, he says, remember, it's poetry, right? 22, Yahweh formed me from the beginning, before he created anything else. I was appointed in ages past, at the very first, before the earth began. I was born before the oceans were created, before the springs bubbled forth their waters, before the mountains were formed, before the hills I was born, before he had made the earth and fields and the first handfuls of soil. I was there when he established the heavens, when he drew the horizon on the oceans. I was there when he set the clouds above. Interesting. When he established springs deep in the earth. I was there when he set the limits of the seas so they would not spread beyond their boundaries. And when he marked off the earth's foundations, I was the architect at his side. I was his constant delight, rejoicing always in his presence. And look at this, how happy I was with the world he created, how I rejoice with you and family. Isn't that fascinating? So we're talking about wisdom, but we're talking about a little bit more than that, right? There's a sense in there that there's more than that going there. If any of you have been watching the new series on the Messiah's ministry, it's called The Chosen, wonderful series. Obviously, we're going to have some differences in the way it portrays certain doctrinal things, but for the most part, it's fantastically done. And there's one episode where they're trying to select the scripture for him to preach in the synagogue. And the one suggests to him, John, he suggests to him, I think he suggests Genesis 1, because it talks about, I don't remember, I think it was Genesis 1, where he talks about the creation of the earth. And then the one playing the Messiah figure, he says that's a good choice. And one of the lines he says is something along the lines of, and it's a great passage, and it's a wonderful memory. And I thought to myself, that's very nicely done, right? Colossians, you also see it in Colossians 1, where it says down in verse 23, 15, Messiah is the visible image. Remember that Colossians and Ephesians are kind of sister letters, right? Messiah is the visible image of the invisible Elohim. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. For through him, Yahweh created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. There's a heaven and earth connection again. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see. Where's that veil, right? Such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Notice that. Thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. So they're there. You just don't see them. Everything was created through him and for him. He existed before anything else, and he holds all creation together. Messiah is also the head of the assembly, which is his body. He is the beginning, supreme over all who rise from the dead. So he is first in everything. For Elohim in all his fullness was pleased to live in Messiah, and through him, Yahweh reconciled everything to himself. He did that at the cross. He made peace with everything in heaven and on earth, uniting heaven and earth by means of Messiah's blood on the cross. This includes you, who, and by the way, remember, he says in John 12, when I'm lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all men to myself, right? It's always that heaven and earth connection, my friends. It's the very beginning in Bereshith, and it's just wonderful how it all pulls together. It's like in the language in Hebrew, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Et hashamayim, the heavens, ve'et haaretz, and the earth. And what connects them, and I've explained this before, but perhaps you might not remember it. Let me actually show you the text, because it's significant. because I don't believe that anything in the scriptures is just by coincidence. So this is Genesis 1:1. And you should see that momentarily on your screen. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. So if you know about language, you know that you have direct objects and you have, not to give you a whole grammar lesson here, but you have a direct object. So a direct object is the recipient of a verb, of a verbal action. You know, Carlos hit the ball. So the ball would be the direct object receiving the action of the hitting, right? Anyway, I won't go through all that, but there's a what's known as the sign of the definite direct object in Hebrew, and it's a marker that you place in there to show the direct object. So in the beginning, Elohim created something. What did he create? What is the definite direct object? He created the heavens and he created the earth. So this is the verse in Hebrew, Bereshit, bara. Can you see the shading around the words? Elohim. So Bereshit, in the beginning, and this means in the absolute beginning. Bara Elohim. Elohim created. And by the way, this word created, this form of created, there's another word called made. It's the word asa, I believe. And that word made it has a different shade of meaning than this word created. The word make almost implies that you have something that already exists, and then you use that material to create something from that. Bara is like you're creating something out of nothing, right? It's kind of interesting. So Bereshit bara Elohim, and then you have, you can just go to Hashemayim, which is the heavens, and then here is the earth, haaretz. But there's something in between each of these. There's something in between each of these. It's this word, et, right? What is that? What is that word, et? Well, if you look at the bottom, it says particle, object, direct object. You see that in the bottom left? This is what's known as the sign of the, it's a marker, the sign of the definite direct object. So Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And it's between both of these. He created what? Et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. It's the sign of the definite direct object. But the interesting thing about it is that look at the letters that make up, and I don't know if you've ever studied any kind of Hebrew, but if you look at those letters, the first letter here is what's known as an aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the last letter is the tau, the aleph and the tau. Okay. So the what's connecting, what's the definite direct object that's correcting both heaven and earth is this marker, which consists of the aleph and the tau. In the Greek, you would refer to this as the alpha and the omega. Who is the alpha and the omega? The aleph and the tau is Yahshua the Messiah. And then when you consider how he's lifted up from the earth and he connects heaven and earth, how does he do that? He does that with the upright stake, which connects heaven and earth. Who is connecting the heaven and the earth? The alpha and the omega, the aleph and the tau. You see, is all this just coincidence? No way. No way that's coincidence, right? It's fascinating stuff that the language should actually work out that way. You know, no one will ever convince me to the day that I'm planted 6 feet under that all these things are just a coincidence, and that Yahweh didn't have an order in which he placed all these things. So let's go back to the text here. So back to Ephesians 3. And of course, I lost my place here. So let me go back to it. Excuse me, Ephesians 4. I think we were in Ephesians 4. So the same one who descended is the one who ascended higher than all the heavens so that he might fill the entire universe with himself. And he gave gifts to us, right? And we learn about those gifts in places like 1 Corinthians 12, right? He gave us the different abilities to help him to fulfill this mission. He gave us those abilities so that we could help him to reign. Now, these are the gifts Messiah gave to the assembly: the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers, all of whom have a mission. Their responsibility is to equip Yahweh's people to do his work and build up the assembly, the body of Messiah. And as you build up the assembly, the body of Messiah, what are you building up? You're building up the temple. You're building up Yahshua, but what is he? He's the temple. So yes, to build up Yahshua is to build up the temple, and to build up the temple is to build up Yahshua. This will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of Yahweh's Son that we will be mature in Yahweh, measuring up to the full and complete standard of Messiah. So for the world to recognize who and what we are, what our identity is as the body of Messiah, there has to be at least this one thing: unity. And later he's going to add a second element, which is holiness, because you can't have unholy stuff in the temple, right? So you need unity, because the temple is a unity. Even the menorah, which represents the light of Yahweh, it was what? It was one giant ingot of gold beaten in such a way that it was fashioned to have cups and everything else, but it's one piece of pure gold, right? And there are many other allusions and examples that we could point to. So verse 14, so everything about this assembly has to be unified. Then we will no longer be immature like children. We won't be tossed and blown about by every wind of new teaching. In other words, we'll be a mature assembly. We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. I love this translation. Instead, we will speak the truth in love, growing in every way more and more like Messiah, who is the head of his body, the assembly. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. As each part does its own special work, it helps the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. And like I said, this is a survey, so I can't go in depth into every single verse, but there's a lot to unpack here. But that's fairly evident. The whole body, you want to keep it healthy and growing and full of love. And love is kind of the juice that draws all this together, right? Messiah's act at the cross was an act of love. And I know that sounds corny to a world that doesn't understand that, but that is the knowledge that surpasses all other knowledge. There are different types of knowledge, right? There's a knowledge that you could put your hand out the window to know if it's raining or not, right? Someone asks you, is it raining? You could say, I'm not sure. I think so. I think so. And then what you do, you go out, you stick your head out, and if it's raining, you feel it. Oh, now I know it's raining. Or nothing coming down. No, now I know it's not raining. But how do you know if a child loves you? Well, you can see it in the child's eyes, right? There's a quality. You can't quite put your finger on it. You can't quite. How do you put that into words? How do you know that anybody loves you, your spouse, right? Because it's just a quality that you sense, that you know in their voice, in their tone of voice, in the look that they give you, right? That's a knowing that's different than the knowing of putting your hand out the window and feeling the rain hitting your hand. And that kind of knowledge is the knowledge that Yahweh has been imparting to us with regard to our faith in Messiah. And that knowledge of love is something that you can't barely put into words. You could see it demonstrated in the things that we do for one another and for others, right? But it's that kind of thing that we want to see continuing to grow, to be healthy, to be full of love. With Yahweh's authority, I say this: live no longer as the Gentiles do, for they are hopelessly confused. Their minds are full of darkness. They wander far from the life Elohim gives because they have closed in their minds and heart, because they have closed their minds and hardened their hearts against him. It's a different mentality. It's a different way of being. They have no sense of shame. They live for lustful pleasure and eagerly practice every kind of impurity. We can't be that way, right? We can't just be the rest of the way that the secular world is, right? It's like the longer I live, the longer I see, and I don't mean this to be, to be overly critical, but it just seems that the secular world, their priorities they're just not my priorities, right? They're not, this is why it frustrates me when I act in ways, I'm just speaking for myself personally, and you can think about how you feel about yourself. But speaking for myself, I know when I do things that where the kingdom is not primarily in my mind and it's more about me, it frustrates me because I know that that's just not who I am, and yet that's the way I'm acting. And the more I learn about what our vocation is as image bearers of Yahweh, the more frustrated I get with myself in those moments, and I'm trying to reevaluate the way I think and the way that I do. And I think that we can all do better in that. We can all do better to reevaluate how we think and how we do. Because when I see that the world, that their greatest, that their greatest achievement is, whatever, something that is like not spiritual at all, I say to myself, really, is that what you're living for? Is that where you continue to ignore the Sabbath for and ignore holy days and treat each other the way in which you treat each other? When I see the politicians, for example, doing their thing, and I see how they grasp at power all the time, and I say, is that what life is all about? To grasp for power and more power, and to lord it over other people every day? And does that make you feel good? Does that make you feel powerful to push yourself against other people? And that's just one example. There's more to life than that. There's more to life than that. And we have a responsibility to find it and to preach it. That isn't what you learned, verse 20, about Messiah. Since you have heard about Yahshua and have learned the truth that comes from him, throw off your old sinful nature and your former way of life, which is corrupted by lust and deception. Yahshua defeated all those things. That's what he went to the cross for. Why do we want to continue to move in that direction? Instead, let the Spirit renew your thoughts and attitudes. This is also what we see in several places, including Romans 12, that it says that we should be transformed to have the mind of Messiah, as opposed to conformed to the way that the world does things. Put on your new nature, created to be like Elohim, truly righteous and holy. And like I said, there's so much more we can go into here, but I want to finish this today. So stop telling lies. Let us tell our neighbors the truth, for we are all parts of the same body. And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil, right? Stop it in its tracks. And I've preached to you many times, and we've done coaching sessions where I've said, when is a thief no longer a thief, right? When is a liar no longer a liar? Is a liar no longer a liar when he stops telling lies? Well, it's not enough, right? So stop telling lies, but then you got to go a step further. Stopping lies is a good beginning, but then you have to go on and you have to take the next step. Stop telling lies, and then let us tell our neighbors the truth, right? And then the next thing here, if you are a thief, quit stealing. It's a good start. Is it finished? No, incomplete. Instead, use your hands for good hard work and then give generously to others in need. So stop stealing. That stops you. But if you stop stealing and you don't do anything else, you might just be a reformed thief. You haven't changed anything about your life. But if you stop stealing and then instead of that, you start doing the opposite. Instead of being a taker, now you're a contributor. Now we have a changed mind and heart. Now we have a transformation. So stop stealing. Instead, use your hands for good hard work and then give generously to others in need. That's a turnaround that I can believe in. Don't use foul or abusive language. So you stop using, we can take a harder look at our language these days. Has it gotten coarser? And if it's gotten coarser, maybe it's time to get a grip on that. But look, it's not enough just to stop using the foul or abusive language. You let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. What would your life be like if you made it a policy that instead of saying nasty words, and this is not just talking about cussing, right? This is foul or abusive language. How do you talk to your loved ones? If you're a boss, how do you talk to your employees? Do you denigrate them? Do you talk, husbands, do you talk to your wives as if they're beneath you? Wives, do you henpeck your husbands and treat them like they're idiots? Like society wants us to believe anymore that all men are idiots. Is that how you talk to him? So he feels like an idiot? We need to rethink that. Parents, how do you talk to your children? Do you talk down to them as if they're, less than worthy of your respect? See, those things, we need to rethink those things. because that is abusive in the way you communicate that. Let everything instead you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them. So the tone of voice that you use, the type of words that you use, if you take time to measure the words before they come out of your mouth, how would your world be different if you did that? How would your world be different if instead of speaking in a way that denigrates someone, you speak in a way to encourage them and to build them up? How will that change your life? Oh, it'll make me look weak, vulnerable. I don't think it will. I think it'll make you look very strong. I think it'll make you look like a person who knows how to control yourself, who has self-control, like a person who is confident of himself or herself, who doesn't need to resort to bullying people with their language. I think that makes you look like a much stronger person. Verse 30, and do not bring sorrow to Yahweh's Holy Spirit by the way you live. Remember, he has identified you as his own, guaranteeing that you will be saved on the day of redemption. Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger. Each one of these could merit a sermon, right? Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. And instead, so get rid of these and bring these. Put off the old, put on the new. It's always about putting off the old, putting on the new. Instead, be kind to each other, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, just as Yahweh through Messiah has forgiven you. And then we jump into chapter 5. And chapter 5 is a very important chapter because it shows you that the key for relationships, Ephesians 5 talks about all kinds of relationships. And what distinguishes our relationships, the relationships of the body of Messiah, from the secular world, from those who do not know Yahweh, who do not know Yahshua, what separates us is that we submit to one another so that our relationships will have a very special quality to them. So the key to all this is submission to one another, submission to one another. Husbands submitting to wives, wives submitting to husbands, children submitting to parents, parents to a degree submitting to children, bosses submitting to their servants, and servants submitting to their bosses. It's an interchange. It's like a social contractual agreement between each of these types of relationships that makes these relationships better, a net improvement in every relationship. That's why when people look at these things in a superficial way, and well, the woman there submit to her husband, oh, there it is, I'm not going to do that, right? It's just it's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's not. It's a misrepresentation of everything that this chapter is talking about. A total contextual fiasco that has nothing to do with the spirit of this chapter. Imitate Elohim, therefore, in everything you do, because you are his dear children. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Messiah. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to Elohim. That is the heart of this chapter, not the one verse that says, wives, submit to your husband, which is what everyone goes zoom, they focus on, and everything else means nothing. This is the heart. Live a life filled with love, following the example of Messiah. He loved us and offered himself as a sacrifice for us, a pleasing aroma to Yahweh. Let there be no sexual immorality. This is all the other part, right? This unity, we saw everything about unity, and now this is his description of holiness, because you can't have a temple that's loaded with corruption. Let there be no sexual immorality, impurity, or greed among you. Such things have no place among Yahweh's people. Obscene stories, foolish talk, coarse jokes. How's your joking around? I had to stop long ago. I have to stop watching most stand-up comedy. I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't even listen to it. I couldn't listen to it because it was so loaded with vulgarity and sexual innuendo that I had no interest. I didn't find any of that funny. I found it denigrating. How could I sit next, and we used to watch when we were in our early marriage, some comedians and all that. But as we watched, it got coarser and coarser. And how could I sit next to my wife, who I love and I respect as a woman, and listen to some of the filth coming out of some of these people's mouths in the lines of being funny? That's not funny to me. It's not funny to me to make jokes about people's genitalia and everything else. And who cares about that? Don't you have any self-respect, self-dignity as a human being? So most comedies and things out there, I just don't care for them. Now, you may feel differently. You may have a different point of view, and it's fine. We can have that discussion at some point. But there's a lot of stuff that I have just chosen. I don't want to be a part of that because, in all fairness, there's some things that I watch that you may not care for either, right? And, so I'm not getting on a high horse here. I'm just telling you what I like and what I don't like. And, perhaps we can encourage one another to do better. Right. But this stuff is not, I like the way they put it here. Obscene stories, foolish talk, coarse jokes. These are not for you. I like that. Instead, remember, it's always a putting off and a putting on. Instead, let there be thankfulness to Elohim. You can be sure that no immoral, impure, or greedy person will inherit the kingdom of Messiah and of Elohim. For a greedy person is an idolater, worshiping the things of this world. Remember this. It's interesting. He's making this connection with idolatry, because idolatry is the manifestation of the attitudes. Idolatry is not about, as I explained many times, idolatry is not about the little statue, right? The little statue is just a representation, a metaphorical representation. It's what's behind the idol. It's what's behind the idol. It's the attitudes. It's the filth. It's the denigration of humanity, the denigration of image bearers in Almighty Yahweh. And it's the worshiping of the things of this world rather than the Creator Himself. It's Romans 1, verses 18 forward, right? How Yahweh gave us over to all these passions and all these things and all these idolatries because that's what people wanted. That's what they chose. We can't do that. We have to think differently. Don't be fooled, verse 6, by those who try to excuse these sins, for the anger of Yahweh will fall on all who disobey Him. Don't participate in the things these people do. For once, there was a time, once you were full of darkness, but now you have light from Yahweh. So live as people of light. Put your money where your mouth is. Put your actions where you say, in what you say you believe. For this light within you produces only what is good and right and true. It's like he says in Philippians, at the end of Philippians in chapter 4, he says, if there's anything pure, anything just, anything right, anything noble, remember that? Think on these things. See, we have to do a mind purge, if you will, a lot of these things that we can do better. I'm not talking about walking around in paranoia, looking and not, I'm talking about a natural, organic changing of your way that you think to elevate goodness, to elevate things that are to have a higher standard. Let's put it that way. We have to have a higher standard, not a high and mighty standard. That's not what it's saying, but a higher standard. And we know instinctively what's a higher standard. We know. We just choose to ignore it sometimes. For this light within you produces only what is good and right and true. Carefully determine what pleases Yahweh. It means you have to think about it. You have to give some thought to it. You have to pray about it. You have to be in the word of Yahweh so that you can learn what pleases Yahweh. How could you know what pleases? Some of you haven't opened the Bible, my friends, in a long time. And I'm not, I don't mean to lay a guilt trip on you, but you need to open your Bible on more than just the Sabbath. Because how do you know? How can you carefully determine what pleases Yahweh if you don't know what the word says? All you're going to be doing is feeding on the worldly philosophies, and where do we get our values from? Do we get it from cable talk shows? Do we get it from talk radio? Where do we get our primary values from? I'm not saying don't watch those things. I watch some of those things, but our primary values have to come from the source, and the source is the word, because that is what our standard is. Whether we're listening to, a cable show, or news report, or I don't care if it's liberal, I don't care if it's conservative, libertarian, whatever it may be. All of it has to center around the word of Yahweh. There's some things that lean towards my conservative way of thinking that I can't listen to or watch because I can't stand the way people say it. So their message, I believe in the message that they're bringing, but I do not believe in the method in which they deliver it. So it loses its luster for me, and it loses its credibility, because I cannot take a message that might be factually correct, but is delivered with anger and bitterness and denigration to other people. Some of you may have seen a Facebook post that I put on Facebook yesterday. I haven't posted to Facebook probably over a year. or at least close to it. But yesterday, I just felt compelled to say something about the piggish way in which people are treating one another with regard to these vaccinations. And I'm not going to give you all my political views on that, but I'm going to say that there's room on both sides for improvement. Because one says this one doesn't get the vaccine because they hate all of humanity and all they care about is themselves, and the other ones say, well, these people, they want everyone to give into the mark of the beast and whatever else, and it's this name calling and all this foolishness that's going on that nobody's listening to one another. They're just making assumptions about one another's character and treating each other like pigs. So I had to put some statement out there yesterday, and I hope for whatever it's worth is my little part in the world to say something. We can't just because we believe in something and we might have the facts in our opinion in our favor does not give us the right to treat other image bearers like if they're animals or worse, subhuman, right? We have to be careful about that. Determined, take no part, verse 11, in the worthless deeds of evil and darkness, instead expose them. It is shameful even to talk about the things that wicked people do in secret, but their evil intentions will be exposed when the light shines in them. For the light makes everything visible. This is why it is said, awake, O sleeper, rise up from the dead, and Messiah will give you light. Okay, I don't have time to unpack all that, but so be careful how you live. Don't live like fools, but like those who are wise. Make the most of every opportunity in these evil days. Don't act thoughtlessly, but understand what Yahweh wants you to do. And again, you can't do that unless you know his word. Don't be drunk with wine because that will ruin your life. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit, singing psalms and anthems and spiritual songs among yourselves, and making music to Yahweh in your hearts. And give thanks for everything to Yahweh the Father in the name of our sovereign Yahshua Messiah. So it's interesting because, again, it's always about raising your standards. Where would we all be if we raised our standards? That if instead of saying an evil word against someone, we would check ourselves and instead say something kind to them. Doesn't mean you always have to agree with everybody, but what if we said something kind about them instead? That we deliberately started becoming intentional with our words. Imagine that if we actually decided to follow the advice in Proverbs. And by the way, the only way you know the advice in Proverbs, you know how you do that? You read Proverbs. So where would we be if we would actually follow that advice? People want to be wise. Don't you want to be wise? People say they want to be wise. But what do they do about it? It's not enough to just say, I want to be wise. If you want to be wise, you do something about it. You know how you could be wise? By reading wisdom. The word of Yahweh is wisdom. The book of Psalms is wisdom. Read it. Internalize it. Read it in several translations. You don't understand it in one version? There are 50 others that you can look at that will help you to have a good, well-rounded understanding of every single verse that appears in Proverbs. Then we go into the submission part, right? And further, submit to one another out of reverence for Messiah, verse 21. And I would need like 2 or 3 lessons to go into each one of these deeply. But this is where we get into trouble when we misread it. For wives, this means submit to your husbands as to Yahweh. But it doesn't stop there. There's no full stop at the end of that sentence where this means somehow that a woman is trampled under her husband's feet. Keep reading. For a husband is the head of his wife as Messiah is the head of the assembly. Don't put a full stop there. Keep reading. He is the savior of his body, the assembly. As the assembly submits to Messiah, so you wives should submit to your husbands in everything. Keep reading. For husbands, this means love your wives, just as Messiah loved the assembly. He gave up his life for her to make her holy and clean, washed by the cleansing of Yahweh's word. He, Yahshua, did this to present her, his wife, to himself as a glorious assembly without a spot or wrinkle or any such blemish. Instead, she will be holy without fault. In the same way, in the same self-sacrificial way, in the same loving way, in the same high standard way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. What woman would not want that? What woman would not submit herself to her husband given those conditions? For a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. If a man wants to have a good relationship with his wife, start here. It's not just a woman who can misread this. Men misread this all the time too. You want your wives to be the perfect mate? Well, why don't you start by being the perfect mate? How do you treat your wife? Do you treat her in a self-sacrificial way? Do you give of yourself? Do you make her more important than you? If you don't, I'm sorry, but shut up. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as they love their own bodies. For a man who loves his wife actually shows love for himself. So if you don't love yourself, treat your wife like dirt, because you're showing the same lack of dignity and self-respect to yourself. No one hates his own body, but feeds and cares for it, just as Messiah cares for the assembly, and we are members of his body. Let's try that message on in a morning service. As the scriptures say, a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. This is a great mystery, but it is an illustration of the way Messiah and the assembly are one. So again, I say each man, he repeats it, right? Each man must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. That's a reasonable formula for a good marriage. Ephesians 6. Okay, I'm gonna move on because I could spend a while on that. Ephesians 6. Children, so it doesn't end there. The relationships continue. Children, obey your parents because you belong to Yahweh, for this is the right thing to do. Obey your parents, children. This is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is your responsibility. This is the first commandment with the promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on the earth. So much packed into that I can't get into at the moment. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Hello. Do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. And I can give you entire word studies on what it means to provoke your children to anger. So fathers, you think that your children are given to you so that you can order them around? Is that what that means, to love your child and to train them in the way in which they should go? To treat them as if they're, your little slaves or your little, come on now, right? And I know that none of you are like this. I'm speaking very broadly here, right? Because I think we all know that when you provoke your children that way, you can expect that all you're going to get is anger and disobedience back. And if you're expecting anything else and you're treating your children that way, you need to look to yourself first before you look to your children. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from Yahweh. Are you doing that part? When parents come to say, oh, my child this, my child that, well, let me tell you something. I'm a parent. And, I won't give you details, but I know myself better than anyone else. And, there are things that happen with my children, little things along the way that thankfully didn't become bigger things, but there are bumps in the road. And a lot of that, I had to take a good hard look at myself. I didn't do it perfectly. My children know that. I've apologized to them for it. I'm learning just like everyone else is learning. We have to be willing to learn. And in the moments when I wasn't willing to learn, you know what? They let me know through their actions, through their words. That's the human condition. Bring them up with the discipline instruction that comes from Yahweh. And notice it's the discipline instruction that comes from Yahweh. There were moments that I can tell you where there was discipline instruction that I thought was coming from Yahweh, but my interpretation was not exactly, where it should be. So there was conflict. Bring them up with the discipline instruction that comes from Yahweh. And it takes a little research to learn that. It takes some trial and error to learn that. But if you want to have a relationship with your children, you got to learn it. So those rocky areas, we had to go through those rocky areas. Yeah, bringing them up with discipline instruction that comes from Yahweh with compassion, empathy, unconditional love, and boundary setting. And it all sounds so wonderful now, but I didn't remember all those words and all those words as I was raising them, right? Because children don't come with an instruction manual. But I could have done a better job. And, and we made it through. And you're going to make it through also, those of you who have children. But remember, it's a two-way street and it takes work. This is all of this. Your relationship, fathers with your children, your husbands with your wife, wives with your husbands. It takes work. It takes discipline. It takes learning. And if we are not willing to do all those things, we're going to have problems because that's the human condition. Slaves, Obey your earthly masters. You don't like the term slaves here? In the modern day, let's say servants. Let's say you don't like the term servants. Let's say employees. And obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Messiah. Try to please them all the time, not just when they're watching you, right? Don't just have integrity when people are watching you. Have integrity because you have integrity. As servants or slaves of Messiah, do the will of Yahweh with all your heart. Notice you're doing the will of Yahweh. You have to act as if you're doing the will of Yahweh. Work with eagerness as though you were working for Yahweh rather than for people. If we had the attitude in our jobs and the things that we're doing, I think that will help us to reframe some of the work situations in which we find ourselves. I've had to do that many times with my job, many times. Because when I just see it from the point of view as I'm working for this guy, whoo, that is not a happy day. I'm working for this, and I work in a political environment where people are, anyway, let's just say that I really, really have to shift my thinking on those days, or else I would not have lasted as long as I do. I've had to tell myself many a time, okay, this job is paying for me to help my wife to have food, my children to have what they need. It's helping me to fund my future dreams and on the right. There are all sorts of techniques I've had to use over time, including this one, right? I'm learning how to serve Yahweh. I'm learning how to deal with people in all kinds of situations because it's going to help me in ministry or something to that effect. Because if I were doing it just for the people for whom I work or for the system in which I work, I would never have made it. What techniques do you have to use in the day-to-day? Some of you have jobs you absolutely love. Bless you. May you multiply, my friend. But some of us have to really work at getting our mind in the right place. Remember that Yahweh will reward each one of us for the good we do, whether we are slaves or free. Masters, treat your slaves in the same way, right? There's something for everybody. Slaves to the masters, masters to slaves. And remember, this is masters and slaves in a first century setting, okay? Don't threaten them. Remember, you both have the same master in heaven and he has no favorites. If you want to see a good example of this from a biblical perspective, you remember the book of Philemon, the one chapter letter of Philemon, which is the first one that we did for Bible Hour 1. And then the last section here, 6:10, a final word, be strong in Yahweh and in his mighty power. We're back to the power thing again, right? Put on all of Yahweh's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies. Here it is, right? But against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places, right? So we're in that cleanup battle against those unseen powers that know that their time is short. So these are the guys who haven't necessarily quite gotten the message, right? This is like the ancient world where you won the war, but then you have little skirmishes still going on in little corners of the kingdom because they haven't quite gotten the word yet, or they don't quite believe it yet. So this is in effect what's been happening for over 2,000 years now. Because, time and space operate differently for the unseen world, right? So for us, 2,000 years is an awful long time. For them, maybe not so much. So there's this constant push and pull, and we happen to be in the middle of it because now is our time. Therefore, put on every piece of Yahweh's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. And notice that everything that you see here is defensive in nature. We're not taking offense. Yahshua is the one who takes the battle to the enemy for us. We defend. Then after the battle, you will still be standing firm. Stand your ground. That's a defensive mode. Stand your ground, putting on the belt of truth and the body armor of Yahweh's righteousness. And I won't take time to go through each of these because we'd be here for a while. For shoes, put on the piece. You get some of these straight out of Isaiah. For shoes, put on the piece that comes from the good news so that you'll be fully prepared. That's Isaiah 52, right? How blessed are the feet of the one, etc. And that's the one who's proclaiming the gospel. In addition to all of these, hold up the shield of faith to stop the fiery arrows of the devil. Put on salvation as your helmet and take the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh. Pray in the Spirit at all times and on every occasion. Prayer is a powerful weapon, right? Stay alert and be persistent in your prayers for all believers everywhere. And pray for me too as he starts to wrap up the letter. Ask Yahweh to give me the right words so I can boldly explain Yahweh's mysterious plan that the good news is for Jews and Gentiles alike. And there he restates his mission. I'm in chains now, probably in Ephesus. Some say Rome. I think he was in Ephesus. I am in chains now, still preaching this message as Yahweh's ambassador. So pray that I will keep on speaking boldly for him as I should. And his prayers were answered because he did. To bring you up to date, Tichgets will give you a full report about what I am doing and how I'm getting along. He is a beloved brother and faithful helper in the master's work. I've sent him to you for this very purpose, to let you know how we are doing and to encourage you. Peace be with you, dear brothers and sisters, and may Elohim the Father and the sovereign Yahshua Messiah give you love with faithfulness. May Yahweh's grace be eternally upon all who love our sovereign Yahshua Messiah. This letter is from Paul and Timothy, slaves of Yahshua Messiah. I'm writing to all of Yahweh's holy people in Philippi who belong to, well, did I switch over to Philippians? No, right? Oh, I see. Okay, I was already done. I started over to, okay. Yeah, I was wondering why the book of Ephesians said this letter is from Paul and Timothy, although that could have been possible because Timothy became bishop of Ephesus. But yeah, so we were done. Yeah, that's one thing about this accordance, that it doesn't give you a clean break. You see that? And it starts into Philippians 1. Okay, so peace be with you, dear brothers and sisters, and may Elohim, the Father and sovereign Yahshua Messiah, give you love with faithfulness. May Yahweh's grace be eternally upon all who love our sovereign Yahshua Messiah. And that's the book of Ephesians. Okay, that's a mouthful. A lot more that we could say about that, but I think you get the message. Somehow we lost part 1, the recording. Hopefully part 2 comes out. And I tried. That's one of the reasons I tried to give you a nice recap of chapters 1 and 2. It doesn't give you everything I did last week, but it gives you a little bit of something. And by the way, I did mean to do this last week, so let me do one more thing very quickly. I had meant to show this to you, and I did not have that opportunity last week. So let me. Can you see the map up there? Okay. Let me do it this way. Just to kind of round this out. So I had wanted to show you a few pictures of Ephesus. Can you see these? No? Okay, let me get out of here. And how about now? Okay, so these are the remains of the temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Remember I told you about Diana of the Ephesians? This is the remnants of it. This is the site in Turkey, in modern day Turkey, where Ephesus is. This is a statue of Artemis, of Diana of the Ephesians. And you notice that you have these protuberances here that have been identified as different types of things that I won't get into, but they all represent fertility. And these are probably, I'm not really sure, but what animals these are. But you see what Paul and his folks were up against. This is the remains of the great theater at Ephesus. If you look at Acts 19, it's talking about the theater that Paul was dragged out of. This is what we're talking about, this theater here, which of course would look a lot different in this day. These are just the ruins. This is another angle of the theater. And then you can see the road, this road here. Can you see my cursor moving? This is the road that leads to the harbor. The harbor is no longer there, but this leads to the ancient harbor. So these are just some of the pictures. This is another angle looking at the actual theater itself. Right, so these are the seats. We're in the seats up toward the front rows, and there's the theater, and you can see that same road going up this way. Okay, this is a closer view of the road. This is a relief of a gladiator found in Ephesus. So they would have had shows with gladiators. This is from if I'm not mistaken, a brothel. Yeah, it's an advertisement for the brothel at Ephesus. So, the things that people did back then, violent entertainment and brothels and all that, we have our own versions today, right? This is another temple area, and I could show you a lot more, but that's enough for now. Just want to give you a little taste of some of the the things out in ancient Ephesus that are still there as witnesses. Okay, so that's all I want to cover today. Do you have any questions or need any clarification on anything that I spoke of today? Let's go ahead and put in the chat, please. You could stop.